Thank you for this opportunity. Such a pleasure to be here with all of you and to be part of this session for today. I'll just briefly share about the work of Youth and for Girls and also Purposeful, and just share about our grant making model. So, as Ademi has said, Purposeful is an Africa-rooted global hub for girls activism, and we were actually born out of Sierra Leone during the first Ebola crisis. So we really are set up to respond to crises. Even as we speak about the COVID pandemic, we have really been responding to it in such groundbreaking ways that maybe most of the other funders who have a longer track record or have been funding for a longer period of time have not been able to do. At With and for Girls and at Purposeful, we believe that to be a girl is to live on the front lines of injustice. And to be a girl is to resist. And that's why I titled my talk on funding, resourcing resistance, because we believe that girls are resisting across the world, wherever they are, and in so many ways, depending on what's going on in their given spaces. At Purposeful, we value joy. So we see joy as a form of resistance. We want to program with joy. We want to give funding that brings joy to the people that we are serving or giving that particular funding. We also really want to cultivate radical imagination. So yes, there are ways that we've had funders have been funding for a long period of time, but we also want to encourage our grantees to imagine their work and their ways of being in such radical ways and bring that to us, and we are able to fund that. We want to also recognize the lived experiences of girls and young women in our funding. So you will realize if you check our website, which I invite you to, you realize that we don't have very deep metrics on impact or put impact as the front thing that we are looking for, because we recognize that some of the impact that we are looking for when it comes to working with girls and young women, it cannot really be quantified or fit in a matrix. But the stories that we hear from the girls and the young women, we want to center those because we see that as a value or as a way of measuring our own impact. We like to take bold actions and to embrace many ways of knowing. At Purposeful, we've set out to really turn upside down the world of funding and approach it from the point that funders do not know everything. So we invite girls, we invite young women to speak to us in ways that they want us to hear them, and we are really invested in hearing them and ensuring that we are responding to them in the ways that they want to be responded to. So overall, we believe that if you give girls resources, for example, funding, mentorship, and connections, as well as networks and platforms, then you start to see that cultural conversations are shifting. Harmful practices that we already know affect girls and women more in our various societies start to erode, and we see power balancing and systems of oppression start to crack. And that's the way we envision ourselves contributing to girls living in safety, dignity, and freedom. That's how we see ourselves transforming the world. And now I'll focus on how we're transforming the world through the With and for Girls Fund, which is a specific grant that fund that I lead at Purposeful. And Purposeful has two main grants. One is the With and for Girls Fund, and then the other one is called the Global Resilience Fund for Girls and Young Women, which is really a pop-up fund which we started last year to resource groups of girls and young women and non-binary people across the world and resource the ways that they were responding to the COVID pandemic. Of course, when we started, we thought it would be a pop-up fund because didn't we all think that this COVID pandemic was going to be 3 months or so, and then we'd move back to our lives as normal? And that hasn't happened, unfortunately, for all of us. And the fund seems to be taking a new life of itself. So if you keep looking out, then you would be able to see our next invites for groups to apply for that particular fund, that is the Global Resilience Fund. But now focusing on the With and for Girls Fund, it is the world's only Africa-rooted global fund for girls organizing and activism. We call it the only first Africa-rooted because, of course, if you follow the grant-making cycles or where the money comes from, mostly it comes from the north and then flows south to the to the countries that are in the global south. But With and for Girls Fund is actually, we're just getting registered here in Kenya where I am based. And of course, you're, as I already mentioned, Purposeful is based in Sierra Leone, and we have an office in the UK. But our idea is that in the next 5 years, we are moving all of our funding as Purposeful from the African continent to the rest of the world. And that's really a political statement, because we do know that there may, if the political discourses on the wealth of Africa or whether Africa is poor or not, we can have conversations and debates around that for years to come. But we also want to really center Africa as a resourceful continent that is also able to resource the work of girls across the world. So we want to reframe the way grant making practices have been done by funders, where most of the time it is the funder who dictates what the groups are getting and how they are accessing that funding. So some of the things we have done is, for example, we don't have a tedious application process. If you go to our website, we have an ongoing database where groups can submit their profiles. And when you go to submit your profile, you realize that the questions are very few and very simple to answer. And it's that way because we realize that sometimes the reasons why girls and young women do not access funding, even young people, young men who are just starting out, the reason is, as funders, we've really complicated our ways of asking questions. So I could be asking you what is your name, but the question, the way I phrase that, it will take you quite a while to figure out, oh, she actually just wanted to know my name. So we've gone ahead and simplified that, because we do recognize that some of the groups we fund are made up of girls who have not been to school or do not have a certain level of education that allows them to interact with the donor world that can be very complex. And of course, funders have all the money to hire consultants to come up with these really complex frameworks. And we want to move away from that, ensure that we are very simple in the way we ask questions, in the way we ask groups to report to us, in the way even we transfer money to the groups that we have found to fund. So some of the things we do is we fund unregistered groups. We fund groups that have loosely come together to organize about a certain issue. And we fund groups that have not even existed for a long period of time. So the things about, the track record, all of those, we are turning that upside down and saying that girls are organizing across the world in such profound ways, and we want to be part of that transformation. So the only thing I think about with and for girls is just in the name, that we will only fund girls and young women who are below 30. And of course, there's a whole history of how funds have been moving across the world, that these particular groups are always left out because of the age and the experiences, and we are trying to address that. So I'll invite you to check our website and see some of the amazing things that we are doing. If you're working with girls, you're definitely welcome to submit your profile to our website, and our grant making is ongoing throughout the year. So whenever we have a new window, we would definitely invite the groups that have already submitted their profiles to now move on to the next phase, where we start considering those groups for funding.